Hola, happy Wednesday, fellow Earth dwellers. um, it is my first Mystery Unsolved video of the year. I said I was going to do one last week, and by God, no, I said I was going to do one yesterday, but you wouldn't. Actually, I didn't. Yes, I posted on my story that I was going to do one today, and here I am. I apologize, not that anyone cares, but I would have done one last week, but obviously, with the events that happened last Wednesday, I decided that it'd probably be best that I didn't, and I saved it for today. So, here we are. What is the Mystery Unsolved conspiracy video? Was the moon landing faked? That's what we're talking about today. That's what I'm talking about today. First things first, I don't think we went to the moon. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't believe the Earth is flat, by the way, but I don't believe that we went to the moon. And I have 15 theories and evidence to support this. Normally I have like 7 or 8, but this has been going on since 1969 when the moon landing supposedly happened, so there's plenty of evidence. Plenty of crazy ones. So basically, I'm going to tell you like I told the folks over on Twitter. Excuse me. I'm going to read all 15 theories, and then I'm going to go back to the first, and then I will give my opinions and thoughts on what I read and my opinions themselves on each theory. So with that being said, was the moon landing faked? Here are reasons why. Alright, by the way, these are in no particular order. Number 1, the wind blowing the flags. The radiation belt. Hollywood staged it with Walt Disney and Stanley Kubrick. Shadows don't make sense. Footage from a movie about Mars. Crosshairs behind objects. No stars. Photograph quality too high. Painted background. Too many photos. Coca-Cola bottle. Hotspots. Camera would be fogged by radiation. Camera would melt. Footprints are well preserved. And then I will round all of this up with a simple, well, if we didn't go to the moon, Justin, then where did we go? And you should think about that long and hard, and surely you can come up with an answer before I tell you. So, yeah. Alright, so first things first, the wind blowing the flags. Now, I don't remember, I've heard about this one, I don't know if there was wind on the moon, there isn't wind on the moon. Regardless, that's right, there is supposedly wind on the moon. It's blowing the flag. But here's the weird thing is, there wouldn't be wind on the moon. And if there was, it would be blowing in the direction that the flag was blowing in the right direction. Even though there's no moon. I mean, even no moon. Even though there's no wind in space, the flag was blowing. But apparently, if there was wind on the moon, it's not blowing in the right direction. So this is all some big conjumbled heap of nonsense. But again, there's not supposed to be wind, so why is the flag blowing? Don't make sense to me. The radiation belt. This one I believed for the longest time that the radiation belt existed. I'm sure it does. And that if this is a rocket. It's not my hand, it's a rocket. It's going up, and then boom, it hits the radiation belt. This is implied that the astronauts wouldn't survive it, or they'd be injured, might cause death even. They wouldn't get past the radiation belt. But we've sent plenty of, astronauts up into space, and they always had to go past the radiation belt. So what's the difference here? Unless, back in 1969, the equipment astronauts wore wasn't good enough to protect them from radiation. Now we're talking. How do you explain that? Hollywood staged it with Walt Disney and Stanley Kubrick. Okay, I knew about the Stanley Kubrick one, but I didn't know about Walt Disney. So it's implied that Hollywood staged the whole thing. Walt Disney funded it. Yes, that Walt Disney. How many Walt Disneys do you know? The same man who created Mickey Mouse staged the moon landing. I'm just going to let you process that for a minute. Walt Disney funded it, and it was produced by Stanley Kubrick, the director and producer. So, definitely possible. I know for a fact that for years, people asked Stanley Kubrick whether or not he faked the moon landing and if he had a part in it. And he wouldn't say yes, he wouldn't say no. But if you remember in The Shining, my favorite movie, Danny, the little boy, the one who rides the trike, at one point he's wearing a sweater, and it has the Apollo shuttle on it. That's pretty much. It's implied that that's Stanley Kubrick's way of telling you, the viewer, that he had part in the fake moon landing. The shadows don't make sense. Okay, this one I buy. I buy this one 110%. Sorry. So, all the men that went on the moon, Alan Shepard, Neil Armstrong, and the rest of the guys, some of them don't cast shadows at all, which makes no freaking sense whatsoever. Some of their shadows are behind them, some of their shadows are off to the side, some of their shadows are in front. Why would shadows do all that? Also, the shuttle that they came in doesn't cast a shadow at all. Other objects that they place on there, like, it's little trinkets, whatnot, or whatever they brought with them, no shadow. Why are the shadows not making any sense on the moon? Why is the shuttle that they came in not casting a shadow? Because they weren't on the moon. Footage from a movie about Mars. Okay, I should have got the name of the film. I apologize. I was just writing in a hurry. It's implied that there was a movie that took place either 1 or 2 years before the moon landing, was about a movie that took place on Mars. Footage from that movie is identical. Footage from the moon landing is identical to footage that took place in this movie. How do you explain that? Is that just a ridiculously good coincidence? Why does the moon look suspiciously a lot like a fake Mars? That's kind of weird. Crosshairs behind objects. Okay. So like I said to the people on Twitter, I apologize if this doesn't... Basically, if you know what crosshairs are, you can by all means correct me. I won't even be mad if you watch this in the playback. Crosshairs, from what I gathered, I had to look this up. They're like the little things that you see in photos. Like every once in a while when you take a picture and you see like a little piece of light, or like a little dot, like a black or a white dot or something. Basically, it's stuff that you see in images. What they're saying is that in these photos of the moon landing, the crosshairs aren't they're not all over. They're all behind objects, which apparently wouldn't make sense in a photo. Again, I don't know much about this at all, so I can't speak on this, but that does sound a little suspicious. Again, if you know what crosshairs are, if you know a little bit more about them, by all means, explain. No stars. So, I don't think we went to the moon. But I'm actually going to give you a rhetorical on the thought of why there would be no stars. So look at that. You got a double conspiracy on top of a conspiracy. First things first, if we went to the moon, why are there no stars? That makes no sense. They're in space. Surely there would be stars around them. My counter, again, I don't think we went to the moon, so that's why I don't think there's stars, because they weren't on the moon. They weren't in space. But if they were, I would surmise that the reason that you can't see the stars is because they're actually in space and they're on the moon and they're so close. They're in such big open space that the stars are just not definitive enough for them to see. We don't see them. They probably don't see them because they're in space, and because they're actually on a surface out in space, that the stars aren't going to show, if that makes sense. Like, we can see them from, with a telescope, or we can see them, we look up, on Earth, but because they're out in space. I have no idea. I'm not an astronomer. I'm not Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't work for NASA, but that's just my 2 cents. But the main reason that there's no stars is because we didn't go to the moon. Photo quality is too high. You ever wondered this? I didn't think of this until I just came across it. The photo quality for the moon, all these photos that we have of the astronauts on the moon are suspiciously and ridiculously good high quality. This was 1969. There was no cell phones. There was no camcorders. There was no Kodak. Well, there was Kodak cameras, but like, why are the photos in such good quality? They wouldn't be. They wouldn't be. If we went to the moon, it'd be really hard to take photos to begin with. More on photos in a minute. Painted background. So this one is implied that in certain sections, now I gave an example on Twitter. Say Alan Shepard is on this end, Neil Armstrong's on the other. When we look over and we pan over to Alan Shepard, we see him and we see the background in space, and then we go over to pan over to Neil Armstrong, and it's kind of like it looks like a different background. But if they're on the moon, it'd pretty much be the same because everything around them is pretty much the same. Painted back, like how ridiculous of a painted background are we talking? Like B-movie stock footage backgrounds? Because if that's the case, then we never went to the moon because that'd be blatantly obvious. So, painted backgrounds, I might look into this one further. Too many photos. You ever wonder this one too? Why? How is it that we have so many photos of the moon landing? Again, camera quality. Taking a picture itself on the moon must be really hard. Yet we have so many photos of it. How were we so susceptible to take such easy photos of the moon? I don't know. I don't get it. Coca-Cola bottle. This is probably the one where you're like, I can't wait till you get to the cola bottle because I can't for the life of me figure out why it's on the list. So apparently, in 1969, when everybody was watching from their televisions, their small little TVs that were like that, there was an Australian woman who was watching from her home, and she claims to have seen a Coca-Cola bottle floating on the bottom of her screen while she was watching the moon landing. Meaning, she's implying that there was a Coca-Cola bottle on the moon flying on the bottom of the screen. I have no idea if this is true. I don't know if anybody else saw it. But I wrote it down because it seemed absolutely absurd, and if this is true, then why would there be a Coke bottle on the moon? Didn't they drink Tang? The astronauts? Hotspots. This one's implied that the moon was so hot that there'd be no way for the astronauts to land on the surface. And if it's too hot, they couldn't have been on the moon. Now, if they were out in a desert, this wouldn't be a problem. More on that in a minute. Cameras would be fogged by radiation. Didn't know this, but furthering the camera and photo idea, theory, so apparently people can get past the radiation belt, but cameras wouldn't because they'd be fogged by the radiation. Hence, how can we have such high quality photos if the cameras would be fogged by the radiation? Also, the cameras would melt because it was so hot from the radiation and because of the hot spots. See, it's all adding up. It really does add up if you think about it. Last on the list, footprints are well preserved. Now, this one, I don't know. How big of an incline impression can you make when you're on the moon? Moon dust. You step into it. Apparently, they're a little too well preserved. They look a little too good. Like you can see the nice indentation of the boot, the moon boot, the moon boot. God, I'm sorry. This is a long video. A well-preserved footprint on the moon. It just seems a little too convenient. Surely it would be just like it was on Earth, right? I mean, the surface on Earth, the surface on the moon, it's a little too convenient. Conveniently preserved. Last but not least, Justin, if we didn't land on the moon, then where did this supposedly take place? Do you know the answer? I'm sure you do. Area 51, people. That's where it happened. Also, The Twilight Zone filmed a bunch of episodes in the Nevada desert. Star Trek used to film episodes in the Nevada desert. So is it really that hard to believe that the moon landing was faked and staged in the Nevada desert? The biggest and most conspiracy theoried desert there is in Area 51? It's not that hard to believe. It's really not. Last but not least, why did we go to the moon? Supposedly it was because, why not? It sounds like a cool idea. Well, to me, from what I read, and I agree with this, it was more of a way for us to get ahead of Russia, because Russia wanted to go to the moon first. But remember, in 1962, Kennedy said, we will send man to the moon. And then, 7 years later, we did. And the Russians were beat to it, and it was like, Americans beat us. Whatever. The better question here is, why haven't we gone to the moon since? A friend told me, well, it's because, they realized it was so boring, so they didn't do it. Have you ever stopped and thought to yourself how much it cost back in 1969 to send man to the moon? Today, it would be ridiculous. There's one reason why we couldn't send man to the moon today, because it would cost too much money. Pointless taxpayer dollars out the window just to send man to the moon. You'd be like, no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars to go to sending man to the moon. I don't care about that. But think about that. Taxpayer dollars aside, why haven't we been back to the moon? Because it would cost too much money? The government and NASA surely have enough money combined to put together to send man to the moon. If it was so great in 1969, why is it suddenly not cool anymore? Why haven't we been back to the moon since? Because it didn't happen. Sorry. I don't believe the Earth was flat, but I'm sorry, I don't believe we went to the moon. Does that make me crazy? I'm sorry. Don't judge me. We all have our theories and opinions. Stay tuned next Wednesday. I'll be doing another Mystery Unsolved video. Will it be on Bigfoot? Perhaps. Maybe Area 51. One of these two, since I put them in here. But yeah, until next Wednesday, did we go to the moon?